The first time Yu Jing stepped into Lu Yitian's house, the atmosphere between them was both complicated and awkward. On one hand, they were about to become high school classmates. On another, Yu Jing's mother worked as a live-in maid at Lu Yitian's house. And lastly, Yu Jing's mother was a distant relative of Lu Yitian's father's mistress. Standing at the entrance, Yu Jing looked down at the spotless floor, hesitating whether she should take off her shoes. Before she could decide, she heard her mother, Qin Li, say, "Mr. Lu, Yitian, this is my daughter, Jingjing." Yu Jing raised her head and saw a man in his 40s sitting on the couch by the floor-to-ceiling windows. He placed his teacup down and studied her. She immediately realized this must be the man of the house, Lu Hong. "Hello, Uncle Lu," Yu Jing said softly. Lu Hong smiled at her. "So, you're Jingjing. Welcome to our home." He then turned to Qin Li and added, "Xiao Qin, your daughter, takes after you. Elegant and quiet." Qin Li smiled nervously, replying, "Mr. Lu, you flatter me. Jingjing, come in. Don't just stand there." After a moment of hesitation, Yu Jing finally stepped into the living room, which was larger than her entire home. It wasn't until she was further in that she noticed a boy around her age standing at the bottom of the stairs, his face indifferent as he looked at her. Recalling her mother's instructions, Yu Jing smiled and said, "Lu Yitian, hello. I'm Yu Jing. I'll be attending Baichuan High School soon." Lu Yitian gave her a brief, uninterested glance and turned to head upstairs. Yu Jing's smile froze, her hands unconsciously tightening the hem of her dress. Qin Li quickly walked over, pulling her along. "Jingjing, come, this is your room." Yu Jing and her mother were given 2 small adjacent rooms in a corner of the first floor, while Lu Hong and Lu Yitian lived on the second floor. Lu Hong wasn't home often. As the owner of a company, he was busy with work, social engagements, and sometimes with other women. There was no female head of the house. Yu Jing had heard from her mother that Lu Yitian's mother had passed away when he was 10 years old from cancer. Lu Hong never remarried, not because he couldn't find someone suitable, but because Lu Yitian fiercely opposed it. Lu Yitian harbored resentment toward his father, believing that it was his father's constant absence that delayed his mother's treatment, leading to her death. He thought the root cause of his mother's illness was her emotional distress from Lu Hong's long work hours and their constant arguments. Over time, the stress accumulated, and she fell gravely ill. For a long period after his mother's passing, Lu Yitian refused to speak a word to his father. Their relationship hit rock bottom, and even though it had improved slightly over time, it could hardly be called a harmonious father-son bond. Lu Hong wasn't inherently unfaithful. After marrying his wife, he started building his business from scratch. They went from having nothing to running a large company, but just as things were taking off, his wife passed away, leaving him devastated. Overwhelmed with grief and guilt, he found it difficult to argue with his son, knowing he had indeed neglected his family in favor of his work. It wasn't until much later that Lu Hong started seeing a woman named Qin, but in the face of Lu Yitian's strong opposition, he never married her. Instead, he bought her a house and stayed with her several days a week. In the beginning, Qin had tried to win over Lu Yitian, hoping to melt his icy demeanor and take her place as the new woman of the house. But her attempts were consistently met with defiance and indifference, leaving her embarrassed and frustrated. She eventually gave up, saying, "I've never seen a child like him. He's practically a devil." After that, she stopped trying to conquer Lu Yitian. Qin had a distant relative who happened to be Yu Jing's mother, Qin Li. In many ways, Yu Jing and Lu Yitian shared similar fates. One lost her mother at a young age, while the other lost his father. Yu Jing and her mother came from a small town outside the provincial capital. When Yu Jing was 5, her father, a taxi driver, died in a car accident while trying to avoid a pedestrian. He left behind Yu Jing, her mother, and her grandmother. Tragedy struck again a year later when her mother lost her job. To make ends meet, Qin Li took on various jobs as a housekeeper and domestic helper. Fortunately, Yu Jing was a diligent student, consistently ranking first in her class, providing some comfort to her mother. When Yujing was in her second year of middle school, Qin happened to run into Qin Li while visiting her hometown. Impressed by her neat, though old, attire and her honest, well-spoken demeanor, Qin quickly decided to take her under her wing. Lu Hong had long been looking for a reliable live-in maid. With two men in the house, neither of them knew how to properly take care of themselves. Lu Hong was too busy with his business to tend to such matters. Sometimes, when he came home late, Lu Yitian would only have instant noodles for dinner, filling Lu Hong with guilt. He asked Qin to find a live-in housekeeper. Qin immediately offered Qin Li a high salary to come work at the Lu household in the provincial capital. She also secretly instructed her to report any family matters to her. After all, knowing your enemies was the key to victory, and she feared another woman might steal Lu Hong away. Qin Li had initially been reluctant to leave her daughter and mother-in-law, but the high salary was too tempting to refuse. With great reluctance, she left her family behind and moved to the Lu household. Qin Li worked hard and was attentive to detail. She never gossiped and always knew how to read the room, making her the perfect maid. Lu Hong was very satisfied, and she had stayed with the family for nearly 2 years. However, Lu Yitian's hostility towards her was hard to dispel. He knew that Qin Li was a distant relative of Qin, and in his eyes, that made her nothing more than an extra pair of eyes and ears for Qin. Such a maid would never get a warm reception from him. Fortunately, Qin Li understood the situation and, being kind-hearted, felt pity for the motherless boy. She quietly took care of his daily needs without saying much, rarely complaining, which eventually led Lu Yitian to tolerate her presence, though he remained cold and distant. During her high school entrance exam, Yujing exceeded expectations and ranked 12th in the city. Not long after the results were released, the best school in the city, Baichuan High School, personally called Qin Li, inviting Yujing to study in the provincial capital. Qin Li was both surprised and delighted, immediately agreeing to the offer, but after hanging up the phone, she started to worry. High school wasn't part of compulsory education, and various expenses would soon follow. No matter how high her salary was, it was still just a housekeeper's wage. She also had to take care of her ailing mother-in-law. How could she possibly afford it? Qin Li's anxious expression caught the attention of Lu Hong. After understanding the situation, Lu Hong generously waved her hand and said, "A child's future is the most important. I'll give you a raise. Let Jingjing attend the school, and she can stay at our place to save on boarding fees. That way, she and Etienne can go to school together." And so, after the summer break, Yujing somewhat hesitantly moved into the Lu household. From the first meeting, Yujing could clearly feel Lu Yitian's hostility. Although her mother had already explained the reason, she still found it hard to adjust to his blatant coldness and disregard. Having lost her father at a young age, Yujing had a strong sense of pride and a deeply hidden inferiority complex. She had never wanted to live off someone else's kindness, but after much persuasion from her mother, she reluctantly agreed. Her plan was to stay away from the complicated life of this wealthy family, maintaining a peaceful facade. But to her surprise, Lu Yitian wasn't even willing to keep up appearances. On the first day of school, Yujing was changing her shoes at the door when Lu Yitian slowly approached with his hands in his pockets. Thinking he was going to walk to school with her, Yujing was about to ask when Lu Yitian said coldly, "Don't walk with me, and don't tell anyone at school that you know me." Yujing froze, her face flushing red. Although she came from a poor background, she had always been a well-liked student, never treated this way before. Lu Yitian's words were too much for her to bear, no matter how much she tried to tolerate. Biting her lip, Yujing replied firmly, "You think too much. I never wanted to walk with you, nor do I think knowing you is something to be proud of." Lu Yitian smiled slightly. "Good. That's the best." With that, he slowly walked back inside. Angry and flustered, Yujing stormed out, silently wishing that he would be late for school that day. Within a few days, Yujing realized that there was little chance she and Lu Yitian would ever run into each other on the way to or from school. The reason was simple. Yujing took the bus, while Lu Yitian took a taxi. Every morning, Yu Jing would leave with her backpack half an hour before Lu Yitian, who would lazily leave home, yawning, to catch a taxi. Lu Hong had once wanted to get a private car to chauffeur Lu Yitian to school, but Lu Yitian refused, saying it would restrict his freedom, so Lu Hong let him be. After entering Baichuan High School, Yu Jing discovered that the city's top school was not what she had imagined. She had expected a place full of diligent students, where everyone discussed Einstein and Newton. But to her surprise, the students were all quite lively. There were many good students, but there were also quite a few troublemakers. Some were buried in their books, some were mischievous, and some even got into fights. The topics of conversation after class were just as varied. Some seriously discussed schoolwork, some mused about outer space, others gushed about their idols, and some bonded over food and entertainment. Even the top students weren't the model scholars she had imagined. The good students could be divided into two types: the studious, obedient ones and the rebellious, mischievous ones. The majority belonged to the former group, but the latter, though fewer in number, often held the top spots in the school's popularity rankings. Unfortunately, Lu Yitian was a prime example of the latter. Having been promoted directly from Baichuan's junior high, his rebelliousness caused headaches for all his teachers. If he disagreed during class, he would simply throw his books and walk out. By the time the teachers chased after him, furious, he would be leaning nonchalantly against a wall, wearing a defiant expression as if to say, "Punish me if you dare." Yet, despite his defiant behavior, he consistently ranked in the top 3 in exams, making him a source of both love and frustration for his teachers. In addition to his unruly nature, Lu Yitian also had a striking appearance, which made many girls openly or secretly like him. No matter how rebellious he was, he still had plenty of admirers. In Yu Jing's class, there were several girls who would gather after class to talk about Lu Yitian. Lu Yitian played basketball today, so handsome. Lu Yitian got first place again. So handsome. Lu Yitian was the flag bearer today. So handsome. Yu Jing quietly rolled her eyes and buried herself in her workbook. She didn't fit into any group. Here, she was surrounded by many high achievers, and the grades she had once prided herself on were no longer so easy to maintain. In the recent assessment test, her results were just above average. Without working herself to the bone, how could she justify her mother's sacrifices? One afternoon, as Yu Jing walked out of the cafeteria, reciting Tang poetry under her breath, she suddenly bumped into someone. Looking up, she recognized the boy as Cui Hao, a notorious troublemaker in her grade. Not only was his academic performance poor, but he was also known for his pranks. Yu Jing took a step back, said sorry, and tried to leave. "Wait," Cui Hao called after her. "What? Just because you're a good student, you think you can bump into someone and just leave?" Yu Jing stopped in her tracks, exasperated, and turned back. "I already apologize," Cui Hao sneered. "I can't stand people like you, acting all proper." Suppressing her anger, Yu Jing said calmly, "If there's nothing else, I'm leaving." Cui Hao stepped forward and threw something at her. "It's not that easy." Yu Jing looked down and went pale. A black bug was crawling on her. Yu Jing wasn't afraid of the dark, or ghosts, or rats, or even snakes. But if there was one thing she couldn't stand, it was bugs. Any kind of bug could make her lose all rationality in an instant. Other than screaming, her mind would go completely blank. And now there was a bug on her. Yu Jing screamed, frantically slapping her clothes, but too scared to touch the insect directly, causing her to become utterly disheveled. Cui Hao, standing nearby, pointed at her and laughed loudly. "Now this is real. Why the act?" A small crowd had gathered around Yu Jing, but since standing up to Cui Hao came with consequences, even those who sympathized with her didn't offer any help. Just when Yu Jing was panicking, someone stepped forward and calmly removed the insect from her. Before Yu Jing could react, Cui Hao exclaimed, "Lu Yitian, what are you doing?" Yu Jing looked up and realized it was Lu Yitian who had helped her. She was stunned. Lu Yitian, examining the insect in his hand, asked, "When did you start bullying girls?" Chui Hao, infuriated, let out a sarcastic laugh. Don't try to play the gentleman. Do you have a crush on Yu Jing? The crowd began to whisper among themselves. Lu Yiqian paused, visibly irritated.
What?
Are you kidding me? Do you think I'm blind? I just couldn't stand watching you bully her. Yu Jing's face flushed with anger as she stared at Lu Yiqian. What did he mean? Liking her would mean he was blind? Chui Hao smirked. I've bullied plenty of people. How come you never cared before? I think you've got a thing for her. Lu Yiqian sneered and said coldly, even if she gets bullied, it'll be by me, not you. After that, he raised his hand and, unbelievably, put the insect back on Yu Jing. Yu Jing looked at him in disbelief and screamed again, frantically slapping at her clothes and jumping around in a panic. In her flustered state, she tripped over a stone and fell hard to the ground. The crowd was stunned, but fortunately, the insect flew away after the fall. Yu Jing breathed a sigh of relief, only to feel a sharp pain shoot through her body. Struggling to her feet, she found 2 large bruises and scrapes on her knees, looking rather alarming. She glanced at Lu Yiqian and Chui Hao, bit her lip hard, and limped away without saying a word. Neither Lu Yiqian nor Chui Hao spoke. After a moment, Lu Yiqian finally said, "Are you happy now?" Chui Hao shrugged and said, "That was boring," before turning and leaving. Lu Yiqian glanced at Yu Jing's retreating, stumbling figure, frowned slightly, and then also walked away. That evening, as Yu Jing entered her house, she ran into Lu Hong, who had just gotten home from work. Noticing her legs beneath her skirt, he exclaimed, "Jing, what happened?" Qin Li, who came out upon hearing the commotion, rushed over when she saw Yu Jing's legs and gasped, "What happened?" Yu Jing stammered, "I..." Just then, Lu Yiqian walked into the house in his basketball uniform. Lu Hong turned to him and asked, "Yiqian, do you know what happened to Jing's legs?" Lu Yiqian hesitated for a second and looked at Yu Jing. Yu Jing avoided his gaze and softly said, "It's nothing. I just accidentally fell." Qin Li, distressed, said, "How could you fall like this? You need to be more careful. Come on, let me put some medicine on it." Yu Jing limped after Qin Li into the room without ever looking at Lu Yiqian. She knew he despised her, and she hated him too. She wished he would disappear from her life forever and never come back. The days that followed were relatively peaceful. Yu Jing buried herself in her studies while Lu Yiqian continued to be the school's popular figure, and the two had almost no interaction. At home, Yu Jing rarely left her room except to help her mother or eat. During meals, they ate separately. Lu Yiqian never ate with Qin Li and her daughter. It was a rule he set when Qin Li first married into the Lu family. "I only eat with my mom, not with the maid's family." Since Lu Hong wasn't home for meals often, Qin Li would prepare the food and serve it to Lu Yiqian first, then she and Yu Jing would eat in the kitchen. The spacious dining room became an empty display. One weekend, Qin Li was so busy that she couldn't keep up with everything. Yu Jing volunteered to help her hang the laundry. She carried a basin of clothes outside and was immediately struck by how bright and beautiful the sunshine was that day. After hanging up the clothes and sheets, Yu Jing couldn't bear to waste such a lovely day and sat down on the small swing in the yard, basking in the sun. It had been a long time since she'd enjoyed such warmth. She tilted her head back slightly, gently swaying on the swing, and closed her eyes in contentment. She didn't know how much time had passed before she reluctantly opened her eyes. As she stood up to leave, she was startled to see Lu Yiqian standing lazily at the second-floor window, watching her. Yu Jing froze for a moment. His gaze made her feel incredibly uneasy. She lowered her head and quickly walked away, his eyes burning into her back like needles. Soon, it was time for the second-year high school students to choose their academic tracks. Lu Yiqian naturally chose science. His sharp mind seemed tailor-made for it. After much deliberation, Yu Jing chose humanities. While her math, physics, and chemistry weren't particularly weak, they weren't strong enough to guarantee high scores, so humanities felt like the safer option. The second year of high school was even more intense. Yu Jing wished there were 48 hours in a day, while Lu Yitian remained as carefree as ever, balancing basketball and video games with consistently top grades, leaving Yu Jing puzzled. One summer evening, just before school let out, a torrential downpour suddenly began. Yu Jing was silently grateful she had brought an umbrella as she walked toward the school gate. Just as she reached the entrance, she saw Lu Yitian's tall figure standing there without an umbrella, clearly frustrated as he paced back and forth, unable to catch a taxi in the heavy rain. Yu Jing hesitated for a moment, then walked over and asked, "Do you want to walk together? We can take the bus. It's hard to get a taxi in this weather." Lu Yitian looked at her, momentarily surprised, and then replied with disdain, "Take the bus?" Yu Jing nodded earnestly. Louis thought for a moment and sighed. "All right, since I forgot to bring an umbrella." Yu Jing led Louis onto the bus. It was rush hour, and the bus was crowded. Louis frowned as he stood with her in a corner. After the bus wobbled for a while, Yu Jing suddenly noticed a few middle-aged men glancing at her repeatedly. She looked down and immediately blushed. The rain had been heavy, and with only one umbrella between them, her clothes inevitably got wet. It wasn't until now that she realized her white school uniform had become slightly translucent, revealing faint outlines beneath. Embarrassed, Yu Jing raised her hand, trying to cover herself. Louis glanced at her, then looked around, and suddenly shifted his body to shield her in the corner. Yu Jing found herself almost pressed against Louis's chest. She blushed and whispered softly, "Thank you." Louis replied nonchalantly, "Don't thank me. I'm not some knight in shining armor. It's just basic human decency." Yu Jing said nothing, but in her heart, she suddenly felt that he wasn't as bad as she once thought. And perhaps she didn't mind this closeness after all. Louis looked down at her. She kept her head lowered, so he could only see the top of her slightly messy ponytail, some strands wet from the rain. They were so close that he could even catch a faint scent from her. Not perfume or shampoo, but something sweet, though he couldn't quite place it. Could this be what they called a girl's natural fragrance? Louis shook his head, trying to rid himself of the random thoughts. It must be because they were standing too close that his mind was wandering. After that rainy day, Yu Jing found herself unconsciously paying more attention to Louis. Whenever the girls in class talked about him, she couldn't help but listen in. He got in trouble again today and teased the pretty girl from the class next door while being punished to stand outside. He performed a particularly tricky basketball move today, but ended up getting injured. He won second place in the physics competition and vowed to win first next year. Some troublemakers from the neighboring school came looking for a fight, but he dealt with them without resorting to violence. There was always some new story, good or bad, about him floating around. As Yu Jing worked on her assignments, she would often catch herself smiling at these tales. At Louis's house, Yu Jing would rush to help her mother with chores like hanging and folding laundry. Whenever she saw his clothes, she couldn't help but imagine what he looked like wearing them. But she would never offer to deliver meals to him upstairs. For some reason, Yu Jing had an innate resistance to such a scene. Though they were classmates, she was still the maid's daughter, and he was the son of the master. Every time she thought of this, an overwhelming sense of inferiority surged within her. In the 2 years she had lived in Louis's house, she had never once set foot on the second floor. That world always felt out of reach. Senior year of high school arrived, and the students of Baichuan High School were quickly engulfed in a tense atmosphere. Idle chatter during breaks noticeably decreased as the pressure of upcoming exams loomed over everyone. In this critical time, Yu Jing's grandmother fell ill, forcing Qinli to take a week off to care for her. Before leaving, Qinli solemnly entrusted Yu Jing with the responsibility of cooking meals. Due to her family situation, Yu Jing had learned to cook at a young age. Though not as skilled as her mother, she could manage well enough. On the first day after Qinli left, Lu Hong was absent as usual. After school, Yu Jing bought groceries, rolled up her sleeves, and got to work. Washing vegetables, rinsing rice, steaming it, stir-frying dishes. She completed everything methodically. Looking at the 3 decent-looking dishes she had prepared, she found herself lost in thought. cooking for Louis, waiting to eat together with him. This sudden idea made her heart race uncontrollably. Though she was just a maid's daughter making a meal for the young master, why did it feel like they were a married couple? The sound of the door startled her. She quickly stepped out of the kitchen and saw Louis standing in the living room. She tried to calm herself and said casually, "Dinner's ready. Should I bring it upstairs for you?" Louis looked at Yujing. She still had her apron on, and her face was flushed, likely from the heat in the kitchen. She appeared a little nervous as she looked at him, like a wife greeting her husband. Louis was surprised by his own thoughts. He nodded and walked toward the stairs, but as he passed by the dining room and noticed the empty table, he suddenly said, "No need. Let's eat here today." Before Yujing could respond, Louis added, "And you join me too." Throughout the meal, Yujing could hardly taste anything. They didn't say much, but simply sitting at the same table with him was enough to make her flustered. Although she remained outwardly calm, her heart was racing the entire time. After dinner, they each returned to their rooms. Yujing sat at her desk in a daze for a long time before finally opening her books to study. No matter what, the college entrance exams were what mattered most. This was her only chance to change her fate. Before she knew it, the clock was nearing 10 p.m. Yujing stretched, got up, and headed to the bathroom to take a shower. Afterward, as she was towel drying her hair, she noticed a small insect quietly sitting on her workbook. Louis was in the middle of solving a math problem when he suddenly heard Yujing's piercing scream. Thinking a burglar had broken in, he bolted downstairs. Taking the stairs two at a time, he rushed into Yujing's room, only to find her standing by the door, trembling. When she saw him, she grabbed his arm and pointed at the table, shouting, "A bug." After Louis dealt with the insect, Yujing finally calmed down. She eyed him warily and asked, "Is it really dead?" Louis held up the wad of tissue in front of her and joked, "Do you want to check?" Yujing immediately took 2 steps back and said, "No, just throw it away." Louis, still holding the tissue, teased, "If I throw it away, how am I supposed to scare you?" Yujing instantly recalled what had happened 2 years ago and, now fuming, said, "How can you still be like this? Last time you scared me so bad I fell." Louis replied nonchalantly, "I just enjoy messing with you. What's wrong with that?" Yujing's face flushed with anger. She might like him, but that didn't mean he could just bully her however he wanted. Yujing spoke each word clearly. "You spoiled brats are so boring. Let me tell you, no matter what you do, I'm not afraid of you." Lu Yitian thought for a moment, then smirked mischievously. "You're really brave. How about this? Are you still not scared?" As he finished, he casually tossed the tissue into the trash can and took a step forward, trapping Yujing against the wall. Yujing froze for a moment, instinctively trying to push him away, but Lu Yitian grabbed both of her hands. He leaned down toward her, inching closer to her lips. Yujing was terrified, tightly shutting her eyes and pressing her head against the wall. She could feel his breath getting closer, and her heart pounded so hard it seemed like it might leap out of her chest. Just as their lips were about to touch, her mind went blank. But then, Lu Yitian abruptly let go and took 2 steps back, standing by the door. Yujing snapped back to reality and stared at him, unsure of what to say. Lu Yitian looked at her for a long time before finally speaking. "You were scared." Before Yujing could respond, Lu Yitian turned and left. Watching his departing figure, Yujing took a deep breath, feeling like she was about to faint. It wasn't until Lu Yitian entered his own room that he finally unclenched his fists. He had lost control. When he saw her standing there, looking so unshakable and untouchable, he found it amusing. Originally, he just wanted to scare her a little, but to his surprise, he actually wanted to kiss her. He came so close, just a little more, and it would have happened. As he approached her, he saw her long eyelashes trembling slightly with nervousness, casting tiny shadows beneath her eyes. Her face had gone pale with fear, and she pressed her lips together tightly, not daring to look at him. And then, he smelled that familiar scent again, a faint sweetness from her freshly washed body, which stirred something inside him. making him want to explore further. Fortunately, he snapped out of it in time. Otherwise, he had no idea how he would explain his actions. Although, even now, he didn't know how to explain. After that night, Yu Jing could barely meet Lu Yitian's eyes, but Lu Yitian acted as if nothing had happened, as if everything was normal. Once Yu Jing's grandmother started getting better, Qin Li quickly returned to the Lu household. Days came and went, and life fell back into its usual routine, making Yu Jing wonder if it had all just been a dream. The days of their senior year flew by like an arrow, and soon it was time to count down to the college entrance exams. Yu Jing's grades steadily placed her in the top 30 of the grade, while Lu Yitian consistently ranked in the top 3. Yu Jing had no other distractions, focusing solely on the final battle ahead. Her dream was to get into a prestigious university and finally free her mother from years of hardship. She had one additional dream: to get accepted into a university in Beijing. Yu Jing knew that with Lu Yitian's grades, if he performed as expected, he would surely be accepted into Tsinghua University. She just wanted to be in the same city as him, whether he liked her or not. About a month before the entrance exams, Yu Jing walked into the Lu family home as usual and happened to overhear Lu Hong talking to Lu Yitian. Silently changing her shoes, she planned to head to her room, but she couldn't help catching a few of Lu Hong's words. "It's almost done. Domestic universities aren't very exciting. It'd be better for you to go abroad and broaden your horizons. Maybe if you do well over there, you'll end up staying for good, and I can move over and enjoy the easy life." Lu Yitian didn't say anything, but out of the corner of his eye, he saw Yu Jing's frozen figure. Lu Hong also noticed her and laughed, saying, "Jing, how's your prep going? I heard from your mom that you're doing well. You'll definitely get into a top university. Haha, Yitian won't be squeezing onto the same tightrope here." Yu Jing turned around and struggled to speak. "You mean Lu Yitian is going abroad?" Lu Hong nodded proudly and glanced at Lu Yitian. Yes, his offer from Columbia University already arrived. Yu Jing was stunned. She turned to look at Lu Yitian, trying to read something from his expression. Applying to an American university, it must have been a complicated process, right? How could she not have known anything about it? He had gone about school as usual, playing basketball, gaming, teasing her every now and then, often leaving her speechless in frustration. Life had seemed like it would continue just as it always had. Sometimes, she even forgot how she'd ended up living in his house in the first place. How could it suddenly be that he was leaving, and possibly never coming back? Yu Jing stubbornly kept her eyes on Lu Yitian, but he avoided her gaze and turned to go upstairs. She instinctively wanted to call out to him, but someone grabbed her arm. She turned to see her mother. Qin Li looked at her with concern and said, Jing, we're out of salt at home. Go buy a bag, will you?" Yu Jing walked slowly across the overpass, with crowds bustling behind her and the setting sun glowing blood red in front. She held a bag of salt in her hand, staring blankly at the dense traffic below. Not far away, a shop was blaring one of Fei Wang's songs from its loudspeakers. As Yu Jing reached the middle of the overpass, she heard 2 lines clearly. "Like a butterfly that can't fly across the sea, no one can bear to blame." Leaning against the railing, Yu Jing broke down in tears. Just like a butterfly that can't fly across the sea, no one can bear to blame her. The distance between them had always been like a vast sea, infinite and unreachable. Yet she, foolish as she was, thought that by trying hard enough, she could fly across. She should have known better. Her strength was as fragile as a butterfly's wings. Even if she gave everything, even if she shattered into pieces, she could never cross the sea to reach him. 3 years under the same roof was already the greatest blessing she could ever hope for. The dream ends before dawn breaks. That was the last line of the song, and the end of her dream too. Yu Jing got home just before 8 o'clock, and the living room was empty. She gently walked to her room's door and was about to go in when the door next to her suddenly opened. Qin Li was standing there, looking at her with a mix of helplessness and heartache. "Mom," Yu Jing called softly, unable to hide her chaotic emotions anymore, and she threw herself into Qin Li's arms, tears streaming down her face. Qin Li gently patted Yu Jing's back. "Good girl, mommy understands. I've noticed it for a long time. Don't cry. You need to realize that you two are just not meant to be." Yu Jing buried her face in her mother's embrace, eyes closed, tears flowing, yet she couldn't utter a single word. "Jing, the college entrance examination is coming up. You have to be strong. We can't afford to chase after dreams that aren't meant for us. Don't ruin your future," Qin Li continued. Yu Jing choked out a soft but she didn't notice that the door to Lu Yitian's room upstairs had opened. He stood quietly at the door, gazing down at the mother and daughter embracing each other, his expression complex and inscrutable. After the college entrance examination, Yu Jing successfully enrolled in a prestigious university in Beijing, while Lu Yitian prepared to embark on his journey to study in the United States. Qin Li resigned from her job as a nanny at the Lu family to return home to care for her mother-in-law, and Yu Jing left with her mother. On the night before they departed, Yu Jing hesitated for a long time at the bottom of the staircase. She wanted to say goodbye to him. Perhaps this would be their last meeting. Yet she couldn't muster the courage. The staircase before her, though not very high, loomed between them like the vast ocean that would soon separate them. It also represented the gap that had always existed between them, a distance she felt she could never bridge. And he likely never knew of her turmoil. To him, she was just the daughter of a nanny, so he had chosen to study abroad without even thinking of telling her. Yu Jing stood at the foot of the stairs, dazed for a long time, before she finally decided to give up. Just as she was about to turn back into her room, she suddenly heard Lu Yitian's voice from above. "Are you coming up or not?" Yu Jing looked up in surprise and saw him leaning on the railing, looking down at her. She paused, then quietly replied, "No, thank you." "Suit yourself," Lu Yitian said nonchalantly. Yu Jing thought for a moment and then looked up seriously. "Safe travels." He looked down at her and said, "You too." In August, Lu Yitian flew to the distant United States. In September, Yu Jing began her studies in a city without Lu Yitian, starting a new chapter in her life. Past events faded across the sea, and youth was no longer present. From then on, you and I would completely exit each other's lives. 6 years later, Yu Jing graduated from her master's program and returned to work in her hometown's provincial city. Yu Jing worked for a company with hundreds of employees, where she was one of the many unnoticed staff members, responsible for planning and copywriting. To her colleagues, she was a bit shy, not too fond of speaking, and a quiet, elegant girl. No one knew, not even the company's boss, that Yu Jing knew him and had lived in his house for 3 years. The name of the company's boss was Lu Hong. Yu Jing entered the company through the standard recruitment process, needing only the approval of her department head. In such a large company, Lu Hong couldn't possibly know everyone. In truth, Yu Jing didn't think much about it. That year, she happened to find a suitable position at Lu Hong's company, and she just so happened to meet all the conditions to apply. Thus, she entered the company. Perhaps deep down, she believed this was the closest place to Lu Yitian, even if he might never return. That unspoken crush from 6 years ago, which she thought would fade away with time, lingered like a shadow, difficult to shake off. Yu Jing was a diligent employee, skilled in her work and never complaining. Such employees were naturally favored by their leaders. But with favor came jealousy. Praise often accompanied criticism, and recognition was always shadowed by exclusion. Yu Jing's immediate supervisor was a woman in her 40s named Qinjia, who was fond of her. However, a younger colleague in the same department, named Li Zheng, was in her 20s. She was not very capable and had entered the company through connections. She often tried to show off and particularly disliked Yu Jing, driven solely by jealousy. Yu Jing could only try to avoid direct confrontation with her. After all, they were colleagues, and maintaining a facade of harmony was still necessary. One morning, Yu Jing had just arrived at work when she received a call from Qinjia, asking her to deliver a document to the conference room. Yu Jing quickly found the document and rushed toward the conference room. She had heard that this was an important meeting, and it was rumored that a heavyweight figure had joined the company. This was the first middle management meeting. Perhaps Chun Jia was too nervous to remember to bring the documents herself. As Yu Jing reached the entrance of the tea room, she unexpectedly bumped into Li Zheng. The documents in her hand fell all over the floor. She quickly apologized, "I'm sorry," and bent down to start picking up the papers. Li Zheng glanced at her, rolled her eyes, and then suddenly tilted her cup, spilling coffee all over the documents. Yu Jing gasped and looked up in disbelief. "What are you doing?" Li Zheng pouted. "Oh, you spilled my coffee." Yu Jing stood up and replied, "When I bumped into you, your coffee was perfectly fine." Li Zheng retorted, "What? Do you expect my coffee to spill on its own?" Yu Jing was so furious she couldn't find the words. She looked at the mess of documents on the floor, bit her lip, and bent down to continue picking them up. She decided to see if they could still be used. After all, work was paramount, and she couldn't afford to argue with her here. Seeing that Yu Jing wasn't responding, Li Zheng kicked her lightly with her foot. "You're in my way." Just as Yu Jing was about to reply, she suddenly heard a deep voice from nearby. "Why is it that every time I see you, you're being bullied by someone?" Yu Jing looked up and was stunned. Was it Lu Yitian? Or was she mistaken? Standing at the door of the office opposite the tea room was a man in a well-tailored black suit, enhancing the striking features of his face. In 6 years, he had transformed from a boy into a man, still looking down at her, as if nothing had changed. Yu Jing stared blankly at him, her immense shock rendering her speechless for a moment. Lu Yitian walked over, furrowing his brow as he looked at Li Zheng and asked, "Which department are you from? What's your name?" Li Zheng looked at the man in front of her, slightly displeased, and said, "Who are you? Why do you care?" Lu Yitian chuckled, pointing at Yu Jing and said, "I forgot to tell you, this person can only be bullied by me, not you." Li Zheng was taken aback, about to say something. A few people hurriedly walked over from behind and said to Lu Yitian, "President Lu, the meeting is about to start." Lu Yitian nodded, bent down to pick up a page of documents, glanced at it, and told Yu Jing, "No need to deliver it. I have a backup on my side." He stood up and walked away, while Yu Jing remained in a daze, squatting on the ground until everyone had left. Only then did she slowly rise, supporting herself against the wall. Did that just happen, or was she dreaming? For an entire day, Yu Jing felt disoriented, as if people around her were pointing fingers, but she hardly noticed. Even if she did, she had no time to care. Her mind was occupied entirely by one image. She didn't know how long had passed when Yu Jing noticed her colleagues packing up and realized it was already time to leave. She sighed, turned off her computer, grabbed her bag, and silently walked out of the office. Standing at the intersection waiting for the red light, she found herself zoning out again. Suddenly, a black Audi stopped in front of her, startling Yu Jing, and she instinctively took 2 steps back. The car window rolled down, revealing Lu Yitian's face. "What were you thinking about? The light has changed several times already. Don't you have a favorite color?" Lu Yitian asked teasingly. Seeing Lu Yitian again caught her off guard, and she stammered, What are you doing here?" Lu Yitian waved his hand and said, "Get in the car. We can talk later." Yu Jing sat beside Lu Yitian and took a long time to ask, "When did you come back?" Lu Yitian replied while driving, "It's been about a month." Yu Jing wanted to ask so many questions: how long he would stay, why he came back, how he knew she was here, and if he was leaving again this time. After thinking for a while, Yu Jing finally asked, "What are you back for?" Lu Yitian tapped the steering wheel and said, "Inheriting the family business." Yu Jing asked, "Back to help your dad?" Lu Yitian nodded. "He's getting older. It's time for him to enjoy some peace." "Isn't America nice?" "It is, but ultimately, it's not a place to stay long. After a while, you still feel that home is the best." Yu Jing fell silent for a moment, and Lu Yitian couldn't help but turn his head to look at her, saying, "What? Do you think I came back because I couldn't make it there? Not at all. Do you know who I am? My dad offered me a high salary to come back. Yu Jing hurriedly denied. No, I didn't think that. How did you know I was here? Lu Yiqian smiled and said, as the future head of the company, I have an employee roster. Yu Jing thought about it and found the answer reasonable, yet she still felt something was off. What was off? She couldn't figure it out for a moment. But then she suddenly thought of another question. Where are we going? Lu Yiqian replied succinctly, to my house. I'm hungry. You can cook for me. Yu Jing felt somewhat dissatisfied and said, my mom is no longer your family's housekeeper. You can't order me around anymore. Lu Yiqian interrupted. Yu Jing, as a fellow alumnus, I'm requesting you to make me a meal. Standing in front of the villa she hadn't entered in 6 years, Yu Jing's eyes immediately misted over. She once thought she would never step foot here again in her life. She turned away to hide her emotions and asked, where's your dad? Lu Yiqian replied, he's staying with Aunt Qin. Yu Jing froze for a moment, then turned around and asked, Aunt Qin? Qin. Lu Yiqian nodded. Yu Jing looked at him in surprise and Lu Yiqian smiled. What? You thought I was still so clueless? I've figured it out over the years. They got married a long time ago. I didn't expect Aunt Qin to wait for Dad all these years. Yu Jing smiled too, wanting to say something but finding herself at a loss for words. Lu Yiqian pulled her inside, saying, hurry up and cook. I'm starving. Yu Jing tied on an apron and busily began cooking, while Lu Yiqian leaned at the door, quietly watching her. It took him 6 years to realize the significance of this girl to him. When he left back then, seeing her cry heartbrokenly, his feelings were too complex to express. But he thought she was merely a passerby in his life, and those fluttering feelings he assumed were impulsive youth had turned into enduring longing and attachment. In those 6 years abroad, he interacted with many types of girls, yet when the night was quiet and he closed his eyes, it was often that scene that floated into his mind. She was wearing a white cotton shirt and a light blue skirt, standing awkwardly in his living room. Though a bit timid, her eyes hid the same self-doubt and pride as his. When she looked up and saw him, she froze for a moment, then smiled and said, Lu Yiqian, hello, I'm Yu Jing, and I'm going to Baichuan Middle School for high school soon. At that time, he had coldly turned away without giving her any response. Years later, there was something he wanted to tell her countless times. Yu Jing, hello, I'm Lu Yiqian. Nice to meet you. I'm glad you're living in our house. I'm glad that when I turned around to find you, you were still here. 6 years is neither long nor short. He could solve a math problem in a minute, yet it took him 6 years to understand his feelings. He was a man of action. Once he understood, he returned to the country without hesitation. On the other side of the ocean, there were loved ones and a beloved girl. After dinner, when Yu Jing thought about saying goodbye, Lu Yiqian instead pulled her upstairs. Standing at the door of Lu Yiqian's room, Yu Jing found herself hesitant to step inside. How she wished to walk in openly as an equal, rather than as the daughter of a housekeeper. The wish she had for many years was finally coming true, yet it felt so unreal. Yu Jing turned around to see Lu Yiqian, but she suddenly noticed he was holding a large insect, and she let out a shriek, stepping back. What are you doing? Lu Yiqian laughed. Looks like you're still afraid of bugs. As he spoke, he waved it in front of her, causing Yu Jing to scream again. Lu Yiqian laughed heartily. See? It's fake. Yu Jing was stunned. Upon closer inspection, it turned out to be a plastic toy. She let out a sigh of relief and then thought about it, gritting her teeth. Why are you still bullying me? Lu Yiqian tossed the insect aside and walked towards Yu Jing. I see this habit is hard to change. Yu Jing stepped back. What are you doing? Lu Yiqian took a step forward, pinning Yu Jing against the wall, and leaned down to whisper in her ear. Do you know why I came back? I want to finish what I didn't complete 6 years ago. Yu Jing's face flushed, and memories flooded back. Her voice lowered considerably. What is it? Lu Yiqian didn't answer. He lifted her chin and lowered his head to kiss her lips, savoring her unique fragrance. After all these years, It felt exactly the same, just like in his countless dreams. In that moment of entangled emotions, Yujing suddenly understood something. She was a butterfly unable to fly over the vast sea, but he wasn't. It didn't matter that she couldn't fly over. It was enough that he flew over for her. It was such a simple thing after all.